Hey, are you tired of the left and right politics? I hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just click that subscribe button, ring the little bell, and prepare to free your mind from the traditional red versus blue. In Utah, Morgan Arnold was photographed with her cheerleading team. I'm sure you followed the story. When the yearbook came out, she was missing from the team photo. My next guest, David Perry, who's both journalist and historian, wrote a provocative essay on this issue and about similar issues for CNN.com. It's in all my social media right now. He's the co-author of The Bright Ages, A New History of Medieval Europe. He's a senior academic advisor in the history department at the University of Minnesota and joins me now. David, thank you so much for being here. Begin by telling me about Nico. How is he?
Sure. So my son is Nico. He just finished 8th grade. We've had a weird year, as has every parent in the country, of course. But, you know, so Nico is 14. He's a non-speaking autistic boy with Down syndrome. He's the light of my life. And he could possibly walk in here at any moment, but hopefully not. You know, he's had a great education. We've worked really hard. We've had wonderful teachers, and there have been so many moments in which he has been excluded, not in big dramatic ways, usually not in ways that, went hyper viral on social media because of pictures. But, you know, every year there's always something. There's a moment in which the fact that he's not really being included is evident. So I wrote for CNN. I wrote about a time in 2nd grade when his whole class were doing little dramatic dramatizations of books that they had all read. It's called reader's theater. It's a classic teaching technique. And they sent a flyer home and my son was missing. So I said, hey, which book is he doing? And I was told, well, Nico will participate as an audience member. So that's not participation, right? And then he likes to dance and he sings and he actually has a really good sense of pitch. Music is really one of the places where our communication is at our best, and he's in choir. And his middle school choir teacher wants to have, you know, kids in white shirts and professional and totally not moving. I mean, this is 6th grade choir, right? We can maybe loosen up a little bit. And he's a joy on stage, but she tried to, you know, she would write a program in which he would be on for a couple minutes and then he would be off for 20 minutes. Then he'd be back on for a song. And again, that's just not really inclusion. And I want to emphasize that my stories are not dramatic. He's having a good education. He's a happy kid. He's got a lot of friends, but it's just this kind of exclusion happens all the time.
So that's why the story of Morgan Arnold resonated with you.
That's right. And in fact, I was hanging out with my son and my wife walked up and said, have you seen this? You should tweet about it. You should share it with people because we recognized it in our own life. So Morgan was part of a cheerleading team. She had been part of the cheerleading team for a couple of years in Utah. She was front and center in a picture with her squad. And then she was removed and they took another picture. And then that picture was in the yearbook. And, you know, the thing that breaks my heart about it is that Morgan, according to her family, opened up the yearbook and went to look for her picture and saw herself missing. And she handled it with grace and her family handled it with grace. They're a lot less, at least in their public remarks, a lot less filled with rage than I am. I'm filled with rage on their behalf, but they have handled it with grace and class, and I commend them for that. But she was sad. She noticed that she was missing. And, you know, inclusion can be tricky. It can be hard. It can require creativity. But in this case, printing the picture with her picture on it was not hard, right? That was just a choice that people made.
You know, when I read your essay at CNN.com, the line that jumped out at me that caused me to just stop, and this may sound odd to you, is you wrote, in disability social media, where I'm active. And I stopped and I thought, wow, there's such a thing as disability social media. In other words, there's like a whole world out there that I'm out of touch with. Yeah. And I was eager to have you on the program because I suspect that maybe a number of my listeners and viewers are out of touch with, where parents are dealing with exactly these kind of issues day in and day out, and the rest of us are oblivious to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's been, I got to tell you, it's a source of strength and community. When you have a child who is diagnosed with a disability, it is a moment that throws you, unless you're already embedded in the disability community and kind of aware of what these things do and don't mean. I had just gotten a PhD when my son was born. I was, designated by society as an educated man. And when I heard those words, Down syndrome, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. And it was a, it was a tough couple of days and weeks. And then we got plugged into community. And it's the community, both of other parents, but also disabled adults, that have carried us forward through all these years, and that we try to do that for others as well.
Well, David, here's something else that you made me realize about my own experience. Morgan Arnold was regarded as the manager, quote unquote, for the cheerleading team in Utah. I don't think she had pom-poms. I don't think that she had a uniform. Not until I read your essay was I reminded of the fact that way back in the day for my high school football team, we similarly had a manager, and he was a student with a disability, not able to play, or at least play at the level to which that program was geared. And so, this was the role for him. And so I guess this is often the case. True?
Yeah, it's really common. And the way that people mostly encounter these stories are these kind of viral feel-good narratives about, boy with Down syndrome allowed to score a touchdown. And
right.
And sports inclusion's tricky. Again, I don't want to say that this is easy, but I mean, this manager term, right? I had a friend who was a manager of a basketball team in high school. He was a future engineer. He liked math. He kept stats, right? Manager was a job. He did it. And that's not, we're just using this as a euphemism. And I like to point out when we've got these kind of, feel good euphemisms. And I mean, these kinds of stories with Morgan emerge from that too.
Okay, so here's the question. It's funny that you reference the feel good stories, because I saw one very recently, very poignant. It was a football scenario where a young man runs into the game and scores a touchdown.
Yeah,
and everybody felt good about that experience. And now you have me wondering whether that was the right outcome. How do we balance all of these competing interests? How do we balance the interests of Nico? How do we balance the interests of Morgan Arnold? How do we balance as well the interests of athletes who are performing at a high level, maybe hoping that they win a scholarship and go off to college? Can we get it all done?
I think we can. It takes creativity, right? And sports are like that. Sports are competitive. The key is, if we want to have athletic community in a school, that we have it across the board for people who are trying to compete at the highest possible level, but to make sure we have lots of sports and lots of teams and lots of interactions. When it comes to disability and school, whether it's sports or choir or whatever, what I think the key is for the adults in charge are to think a little bit less about, well, what can the typical kids, what can the non-disabled kids do, to feel good and make everyone else feel good, and to really ask, what does Morgan want? How does she communicate? And in this case, it seems like she's verbal and, speaks with words and communicates really well. Nico does not. Nico speaks with behavior and sign and technology. I mean, he speaks in a lot of different ways. But again, it's not what Nico wants is to perform and to be on stage and to be involved in music. So if we prioritize what our children are telling us, what our disabled children are telling us, in my case, then we're on the right track. And the answers will differ case by case and school by school and kid by kid.
Is the feel good outcome that you described and that I recently witnessed in the football scenario, do you think that's taking advantage? Is that for the benefit more for everybody who feels good about themselves for having afforded that opportunity? You don't go that far in your essay, but I wondered as I was reading it.
I mean, this is a big topic in academic disability studies and criticisms of journalism. And I try not to go deep into media criticism in these conversations. Part of it is how, though, we tell the story, right? Are we saying, is the story, this child got on the field and felt great and did this thing? Or are we saying, boy, aren't those other kids great for letting him do it, right? Who are we giving agency to? Who is in charge of the story here? And again, if we kind of shift our focus away from, players on both sides allowed this boy to score, and more, this boy has friends. He is contributing to this community. There's a reciprocal relationship. He's getting something from them, but he's giving something too. Then I think, again, we're on a pathway towards better inclusion. I got to tell you, though, I do like unified sports. Special Olympics in the last few years has really shifted their focus away, or at least some of their focus away from, kind of a segregated athletic contest and more towards people playing together. And that's definitely the model that I want to see more resources invested. I'm not trying to cancel high school football. I'm not trying to get rid of elite athletic competition. I love that. But I definitely want to see a lot more resources poured into more integrated athletic competition.
Here's the way that you concluded, and you can expand on this, and then I'll say thank you. Inclusion is not a favor that adults do for disabled kids, but both an ethical obligation and a legal right owed to all children. Explain.
When it comes to disability, I mean legal rights. There are laws that have been passed that guarantee inclusion, a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment, which includes sports and music and extracurriculars. If it's school related, every kid has a right to do it. Now, the question is, how does it get enforced? Do parents know? Do the teachers know? Where are the resources? And that's where the work begins.
You would have hoped that in a case like that, which brought the two of us together, the Utah cheerleader, that common sense would have prevailed. I mean, it bothers me to think that someone made, this is not oversight, someone made a conscious decision that they were going with photograph B and not photograph A.
Yeah. Inclusion is hard in many cases. I keep saying that. This was not one of those cases. It was not one of those cases. And I haven't flown to Utah and done on the ground reporting, and the family is trying to be very generous to their school community, which of course they're still part of that community. But yeah,
sure,
an adult made a choice and it was the wrong choice.
David, I wish all good things for you and for Nico. Thank you so much for coming by and amplifying on this important subject.
Thanks so much for having me on.